All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of the Big Red Podcast. I'm here with Justin Beebus of the Bite Masons. Hi, Beebus. How's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. I feel like we're the two last men standing a little bit.
We may
Yeah.
or may not have a couple people joining us in a few minutes. Maybe not. Either way, it's all good. We can carry this one forward. So, the topic of today is governance systems, and we're going to be talking about them sort of generally, but with an obvious focus on Optimism's governance system and how they're approaching this really fundamental aspect of decentralized systems. So, like we're both DeFi focused people, or that's kind of how the lens of which we look through at crypto. Or at least for me, that's kind of my starting point. But the decision making through governance is really key when it comes to decentralized systems of all kinds. And a decentralized infrastructure doesn't necessarily lead to the decentralization of power within that system. And you can kind of see that with like the evolution of the internet. And we're kind of seeing that among crypto protocols as well. So we're going to get into this and more. And I think it's a really fascinating subject. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't really care as much about governance yet, at least, which is kind of, I guess, kind of makes sense, but it's pretty unfortunate. But I do think that optimism is changing that. So let's get into it. So we're going to start a little bit more broadly, and I want to ask you, in your view, how does a collective or a foundation approach such a large problem space, that being governance? Like, why is it so hard to design a successful governance system?
Yeah. And I invite, because we're short on speakers, commenters, feel free to jump in the conversation, and I'll put your comments on the screen and we can chat through them. But as far as approaching governance, I mean, I'll tell you, the Oath Foundation has been working on governance for close to a year now, and it's kind of like an ever-changing, like chimeric beast, where part of it is about decentralization, part of it is about compliance, part of it is about utility, part of it is about community, and reconciling all of those different things is a really massive challenge. And I would say, like, the development of Optimism's governance, people really underestimate how huge that is, because it establishes the Optimism Foundation as a truly decentralized entity. And what that means is they're in a much more favorable compliance space than competition. Like, right now, the SEC could come down on, let's say a team that is issuing tokens or managing DeFi or doing anything like that without robust governance procedures, and just decide, hey, you got to shut down now. And the SEC has kind of made its jurisdiction literally just the internet. So it's a tough battle, and it's one, like, making governance in theory, like, sure, that's a tough battle in and of itself, but you can do it. It's done all over the world, whether politically or within corporations or companies or however. But when you're talking about actually making it in a way that will engage everyday users, I think you kind of mentioned it, like, most people don't care. The incentives don't yet make sense. Optimism is changing that by putting literally like hundreds of millions of dollars worth of their token behind it, or more. So, yeah, I mean, I guess long story short, we'll see if they can do the impossible and get people actually involved.
Yeah, yeah. I can only imagine sort of how long it took them to even refine it to a starting point, you know? Like they
Yeah.
have like they have their working constitution, and like they're like, okay, like this is like the very, very basic framework. This is like the like, you know, this is the scaffolding of like the foundation, and like over the course of 10, 20 years we're going to be um it's going to evolve, and the sort of the how it looks in 10 years is going to be probably nothing like what it looks like today. And even
Yeah.
to get to the point today, it's like years and years of work. So yeah, shout out the Optimism team. Yeah, so let's talk about, so you touched on it a little bit, and the way most governance systems work in crypto or in DeFi right now are like really plutocratic. So for anyone watching who doesn't know, that's the control of the system by the wealthy. So it's like whoever has the most tokens is going to dictate the direction and going to make the decisions. So my question to you is, how can we look at other governance systems, other protocols, and maybe some of the failures or shortcomings, and include financial incentives, but not have that be the only aspect of the system? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that to me is like the biggest challenge
Yeah.
because
Give me your
you know
answer.
when
If you could just solve governance really quickly, that would be awesome. Sorry.
I mean, it's like a massive challenge with governance is civil resistance, I guess, is a really big one. And DeFi users, Web3 users don't want to KYC. Um, and the funny thing is, like, you have an Apple product, for example, you're basically like KYCing, to use the App Store. You have a Google account. A lot of times you have to KYC, you have a credit card. But people want to be anonymized. And the problem with that is we can't give people voting weight if all we're doing is looking at an address. So with that in mind, how can you possibly give the average person incentive to vote or incentive to participate? And I think kind of the biggest efforts in this domain are social. So you think about like social credit scores, for example, and I know that's like, a fairly dystopian subject matter, but you think about how can we give identity to an address? How can we give identity to a string of characters? And that has to be through development of social networks, and it has to be through, like, for example, Aave was one of the earliest pioneers in social DeFi, wherein you could get better LTV ratios by referring people. And basically showing Aave that, hey, I am a social hub. I have a reputation to uphold. I'm not going to, do anything that bad. And now with Lens, they're pushing that even further, where you can associate your Ethereum address with a wealth of social activity. And they're trying to get Lens integrated into everything. So now we don't need your identity, because from your address, we can figure out who you're interacting with, how often you're interacting with them, the quality of your interactions, the engagement of your interactions. And then things get a lot more difficult to social engineer. They get a lot more difficult to fake. But still, like, it's so early that it's going to take months and months and years. And you see, like, even on the Optimism Governance forum, they send you an email every once in a while saying, "Hey, you've leveled up," and all of that is explicitly to kind of clout you up, because someone with clout is probably more likely to pay off their loan, or someone with clout is more likely to engage positively than someone without, because they have something to lose. So think about it like social collateral, and that's kind of where things are pushing. But when you think about a trustless system, the second LTV ratios drop below 100%, it becomes worthwhile for people to extract real value out of their social collateral, because we've seen people destroy their reputations for $10,000, $100,000, whatever, depending on their social status or socioeconomic classification. So yeah, it's like it's a problem that's a lot bigger than anything like out there, to be honest. Like, we're working on DeFi, but DeFi is like just math. It's like, okay, we know exactly what to do. We know what we're building toward. We know what we need to build to get there. But with like underwriting people's social collateral, quote unquote, it's like we need to develop an abstract social network using Ethereum, which doesn't lend itself well to that. And we need to do it right now. Otherwise, governance is going to suck. So
Yeah.
it's a tough problem.
Yeah, social engineering is a lot harder than like software engineering, I would imagine, or at least like it requires a lot more sort of nuance. You know what? I can't even say that because I'm not a software engineer either. So I'll just take your word for it. But
well, I think they both go hand in hand. Like, the
yeah,
thing is, like, the software engineer is designing essentially the skeleton that this social network is going to be built on, and then putting meat on those bones, and growing flowers, and I don't know what kind of skeleton I'm talking about, but giving it weight and giving it value. It requires a really good nuanced design and a good understanding of how social networks propagate and percolate. But on the other end, it's like creating social impact and social weight requires a lot of creativity, and it requires like the skills of a marketer, an advertiser. It requires the skills of an artist, a creative. It requires design and engineering skills. It requires whatever skills Mr. Beast has. I don't know like how I would classify those. I guess marketing, but getting people to care and get invested emotionally. That's like it. And Optimism right now, like, I would say they have the most mature governance anywhere, and it has a long way to go. And right now, like, it's being driven by a lot of dollar value. And slowly but surely, I'm seeing like Velodrome, for example. I think Alex Cutler on their team, he is almost like dedicated to governance, just going in there, hitting bricks, talking to everybody. And the thing is, like, I think that will pay dividends. And I think over time, people will realize, oh, hey, being hyper engaged and being universally recognizable by delegates has a lot of value. And that's what we're doing here. Like, the whole point of Big Red is to bring delegates and bring developers and bring Optimism team members and builders all together, so that we can start building that social proof and that social weight. And it takes 100 efforts like these. And right now we're at like 10 live viewers. How long until we can crack that 100 mark or that 1,000 mark?
Dude, shout out our 10 viewers. Seriously, you guys are awesome. Thank you for tuning in. Yeah. Let's talk about getting people excited about it, because like, I think optimism is so powerful in this sense, because you can see in the optimism community how excited a lot of their community is about the governance and how engaged everybody is. There's a lot of people like Alex in there, and I mean, most people don't really, like, a lot of people just in the world don't really care. They either don't care about politics, or they don't think that their voice is heard or taken into account when it comes to like their government making decisions, you know?
Yeah.
And I think like well designed governance systems born out of crypto, born out of like a natively decentralized space, have a lot of power to empower and inspire people. Because like if citizens of this collective of this system feel like their decisions are mattering and can actually see what their vote is going to directly, and maybe even interact with the individuals or the projects that are receiving these votes, I don't know, I think that's like, I don't know, that's a big like moment for a lot of people, and maybe even like a big sort of avenue for people to sort of enter into crypto that isn't so totally centered around tokens and around coins,
Yeah.
and just like financial incentives. So, and
Yeah.
anyways, I just had that thought. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to discuss Fallout Zone's comment. He says, I'll put it back on the screen. Governance has to have a gaming element, so better incentivization for those who are interacting with governance and the protocol. And of course, he's just spitting. We're all just spitting a little bit. But I 100% agree with him. And even something as simple as, hey, upvote, downvote, adds a level of gamification. And figuring out, the thing is, you're voting on something in governance, and it's this huge, like, usually like long tail proposal, like all the value is going to be spread out over time. You don't see immediate impact. It's kind of a snooze fest. The cool thing is like the active engagement is something that can be incentivized and can kind of translate to immediate impact. And I like the idea of, I mean, talking about classic games, and I don't think, I can pill everybody in the whole world on RuneScape, but gaining experience or gaining points, being able to spend those points or being able to use those points as reputation. I mean, Reddit essentially created an entire like economy around upvotes, to the degree that people would like, go crazy trying to repost content and farm upvotes because it gave them some conceivable upper hand over everyone else. And the thing is, that's like, that's essentially creating social classes. Like you often see people on Twitter, which I would say is one of the bigger social hubs, and certainly one of the more active, where people are like, oh, if you have 0 to 100 followers, you're a hidden 10th level genius. And of course they have 50 followers or whatever. They're like, if you have 100 to 1,000, you're an epic gamer. If you have 1,000 to 10,000, you stink like poop. And come up with some arbitrary number, and creating that stratification and creating that competition. That's gamification. Social media, it's all like gamified to the degree, like if you read Nir Eyal's Hooked, the creator of the like button, you're creating games and you're creating dopamine hits. And I think that's really powerful. And I think like that's probably where things need to go. And probably these things need to be codified on the blockchain. And probably liking something or disliking something needs to carry some kind of weight, as in like spend. What I like the idea of is, for example, using our Reliquery system. If you're not familiar, you can go to like digit.xyz. And now we have in the Reliquery repo, for my developers watching, a file or a couple files dedicated to gamification, wherein you can receive and spend the maturity of your position like you would a token. And so now we have these people that, okay, I have a time stake, and let's say we take that time stake and then we, run it through some formula using the, maybe dollar amount of something they're staking, or we find some way to add weight such that it's more Sybil resistant. And now it's like, okay, I am user. I'm going to stake these like maturity points. I'm going to spend 10,000 maturity points or 100,000 maturity points on an upvote here, or I'm going to give this person some of my weight. Because doing like the goal is, hey, how can we have Sybil resistant governance such that like everybody can participate instead of just rich dudes, instead of just VCs? Because we see what happens when VCs are in charge of governance. Nothing fucking happens. And the team leaves to work on something else. Like you look at all the classic Ethereum project, because all VCs care about is preserving capital. And you think about, let's say Aave, for example. I love Aave. I think, the grand pioneers of DeFi, they went off to work on a social network because governance would never approve anything cool and experimental. And now they're trying to figure out ways, to enhance DeFi from another end. And, capital preservation, you don't grow by just trying to protect. And sometimes that's the right thing to do. And of course, you also can't just like throw infinite money at everything. You need time to like manage growth and think about the past. But governance right now doesn't work. Governance wherein the most moneyed parties have the biggest say, it doesn't work. We see what happens around the world in plutocracies, which the word I also didn't know until you gave me the definition. So, thank you.
Nice.
But yeah, it doesn't work. We know that.
Yeah, full transparency. That I saw it a lot in the Optimism documentation, and I had to look it up. So there we go.
Yeah.
Also,
Fallout Zone, we have that built out for Reliquery, but
yeah, dude.
I don't know if we can prioritize it anytime soon.
I was actually thinking about. Oh yeah, I was gonna say your not being able to red pill everyone on RuneScape is definitely not for a lack of trying.
Yeah. Honestly, if everybody just got addicted to RuneScape for like 6 months, and then they kicked it, and then we can just create these infinitely complex social economies using whatever algos drive RuneScape. I think that would work, but I don't know if the world is quite ready.
Well, we know what Beavis will be doing if DeFi gets its head chopped off. We'll be developing RuneScape 2. Whatever. RuneScape 2, the Reliquery version.
Unfortunately, there's been RuneScape Classic, RuneScape 2, and RuneScape 3 already.
So oh my god.
Damn. Yeah, this would have to be also old school RuneScape, which is a remake of RuneScape 2 from the 2007 era, 2008.
Wow. Damn it! Now everyone knows that I don't play RuneScape.
You fool! You're dead. But yeah, I mean, it is like, how can you get someone excited about clicking on the tree to chop the wood, even though it's the most mind-numbing, boring thing ever?
Yeah.
The answer is out there. Like we have like baby boomers playing Candy Crush for 6 hours a day. Like we just like. It's like, okay, do we hit them with the dopamine and be evil about it and get them engaged that way? Do we gamify it and get them addicted to it and spending too much time on it? Maybe, it's like, how can we just like give the gentlest, coaxing into like, I mean, really the dream is getting people to make this a part of their like weekly routine or weekly lives. Like, hey, it's Sunday morning, me and the fiance are going to maybe sit down and go over the new Optimism proposals because we have, maybe a few $1,000s on the network. We're going to look through. We see, it looks like, a cool Bedrock proposal. The charm verse. What's going on with the charm verse? And just being able to, engage that way. And people aren't doing it. People probably aren't going to do it until we figure out a way to make it interesting and engaging. And I like the idea of Agora. I don't know enough to actually talk about it yet. I think probably once Agora is out of beta, which is Optimism's on-chain governance, we should probably dedicate an episode to that. But
Definitely.
yeah, I mean, it's not. I'm going to talk. It's not part of my routine yet, despite how hard I try. And it is because, like, I see the benefit. I see the impact. It's just, again, like, as hard as I try not to be, I'm a flea brain. I think every human being on earth is a little bit of a flea brain, and I'm always in my lane, focusing on the things that I see having immediate, impact, and working on the business and all that. But Optimism Governance benefits me directly, and I'm not, I'm on there maybe once every other week, to check to see if anything is interesting. So
Yeah.
even like the way it's delivered, like, is a little inconvenient, I would say. I think Agora will change a lot of that. And I think, like, and I recommend to everybody watching is, like, if you, let's say you're a community member of Oath, and I would hop into Oath DeFi Discord. We should probably whip up a governance channel, to be honest, and just, like, start talking about ideas. Start talking about what would get you engaged. What have you been had a healthy engagement with in the past?
We've got
Not
a
to say
we've
you
got a
need to be.
channel waiting in the wing. So yeah, maybe we could start having discussions in
Yeah.
there.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, there is a hidden channel in discord.gg/oathdefi.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that, like, our team has been working on, thinking about how can we make this good. Like right now, um, ever since the Oasis thing, which was, if you weren't familiar, um, MakerDAO's, well, not MakerDAO, but an app called Oasis that is deeply partnered with MakerDAO, and mints DAI, or lends DAI to users. They got a subpoena, and I think the UK government forced them to rug the wormhole hacker, which, I don't know if the ends justify the means there, but the implications of that are huge.
Yeah.
Because you think about, like, what happens when, a well-connected guy, gets his wallet or his private key hacked, and in the UK, they can make you perform a software upgrade. And this is more than just for DeFi, but they can force you to perform a software upgrade without telling any users, even if it hurts users.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so what happens when a well-connected politician, gets a seed phrase stolen, and then he, like, puts a ton of pressure on regulators to enforce this rule, and he's just like, I don't care, get my money back at any cost, and boom, we see that happen in governments around the world, and enforcement, like, subpoenas suck. Like, no amount of decentralization will protect you from a subpoena. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Like, you can't explain to a judge, I'm just a governor of this decentralized economy. He doesn't care. He cares about the crime that was committed. He cares about a speedy resolution, and, or she, and they will not discover the nuance, or they will not care about the nuance of
Yeah.
decentralization. So
That really undermines the entire, like, governance system. It's like,
yeah,
okay, yeah, we're all like, we've built this perfect decentralized, but also it can just immediately be cut through and, like, compromised, which
yeah,
renders it a lot less valid and important.
yeah,
I want to go back. I was actually thinking about, you mentioned Reliquery, and this, honestly, like, I kind of only connected the dots today when I was thinking about governance.
yeah,
And the fact that, like, that maturity evolution, it has a direct effect on governance also. Like, you can see Beethoven has implemented with Mobbeats, and it's not only for, creating sticky liquidity, but it's the people who are going to be collecting the most of the governance token are going to be the ones who are most dedicated to the long-term health of the protocol. And like that's like that's at the core of the issue, is aligning the incentives with the ones who are actually have the protocols or the network's best interest in mind. So I'm kind of embarrassed that it took me this long to think about Reliquery in that sense with governance. I was like, oh my god, obviously, like I've been going at it completely from like a financial and like anti-mercenary liquidity standpoint. But yeah, today I kind of had a light bulb go off, and then I felt shame for not realizing it. But I mean, oath governance, it's not live yet, so
it's a work in progress. And I think to Erzengel's point, and Erzengel is like a fabulous, I'm not going to dox his career, but he definitely understands what gets humans engaged and what makes things easy to engage with. And I think like a big problem with governance is it is hard to engage with, like you need to go on a forum and then you need to read like probably 10,000 words of text to understand the discourse. And then you need to go from there to like some voting module elsewhere. And then you need to vote by connecting your Ethereum address, which is already like weird and hard, and signing a message. And then, what do we expect in that case? And what I would like to see, and what I would like to hopefully one day create, if nobody else does, is I'm going back to RuneScape here. RuneScape actually had governance. So they were one of the first games to implement in-game governance, where the users, so if you were a member, you could vote on their development prioritization. And they had a character that stood in every bank in the game, and that's one of the most common structures in the game. You talk to them, and then they show you in the game itself a list of every single feature upgrade that had been proposed by users in the forums. So highly engaged users, think delegates, will be submitting these proposals and thinking about these proposals. And then for users, it was easy as taking a look, seeing the simplest summary ever, like, okay, nerf this, buff this, add this, remove this, and hitting yes, no, or abstain. And while that, you can kind of do that on Snapshot, it's too complex right now. Like, there needs to be an effort to take these 1,000-word long proposals and get a solid executive summary. And there needs to be a way to take that summary and deliver it to users in the most digestible way possible, give them ways to engage with it that are quick, simple, easy, and compelling, and then reward them with positive feedback after they engage with it, whether it be through points, whether it be through, some kind of upvote karma, reward system, whether it has financial value or not. It's easy to program these things into a governance module.
Need a TLDR.
Yeah, give me a TLDR. Yeah. Like, I'm busy. Yeah. I'm busier than I want to be. Okay, yeah. So like, give me like 20 words or less. Give me a tweet. Give me one tweet, and let me click on it, and it can maybe triple to 3 tweets worth of information. And sure, like, I would say, do we expect the average person to understand exactly what's going on? Maybe not. I think that might be where delegation comes in and becomes really helpful, where it's like, I'm just buying coins. I don't really give a shit about, all of the technical nitty gritty. But the thing is, like, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like delegation. You have the exact same problem where it's like, then you have to read the delegates, like what their stance is. And that also has to be like digestible, and you have to like sort of have an understanding of what ChatGPT has entered the chat. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like then they have to choose a delegate, and you can expect a lot of people, and this happens where it's like, oh, this person has a ton of tokens delegated to them, they must know what they're doing, and then you run into the exact same problem of the plutocracy problem, where it's like, oh, well, we've got all these governors, but they're all delegating to the same person because they don't have the time to, do X, Y, and Z. So,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I just,
No, yeah, I totally agree. And it's like, I also don't want to see a freaking sales pitch.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, dude, like I don't need buzzwords, you know. I love buzzwords as much as the next guy, but it's like, give me a no nonsense summary of what you're going to do. Give me a no nonsense impact of it, and then give me a bulleted list of action items that you are going to take to achieve that impact. And like, if you want to write, the Magna Carta or whatever a long document is, I don't know how long the Magna Carta was necessarily, but
don't
just
look at me.
have it out. I don't want to look at it. I don't want that to enter my periphery. Send that somewhere else. The instant I see that, I'm like, I'm taking a bathroom break and I ain't coming back. But yeah, I think, I mean, it definitely needs work. And I think a lot of people see this. I would say, like, with our experience in governance, like, our first draft was way too long, and we've learned the same thing, kind of talking to investors, talking to VCs, talking to other teams. It's like no professional in the world wants to have to read, that much documentation just to make a decision. And if it's really high impact and it affects me directly or my team directly, then sure, I'll do some extra DD. But I would say, like, if you're approaching governance in good faith, you should be totally ready to like do like a short SWOT analysis. These are the strengths of my proposal. These are the weaknesses of my proposal compared to others, possibly. Here are the opportunities, and here are the threats. Here's a summary, and you can do that like so quickly. Like I can read through a bulleted list of that in a minute. And I think that's super duper important, is making it consumable and yummy. Like I want to read it and be excited by it. And I just don't get a lot of that. And I'm guilty too. Like I'm the long-winded ass dude. You don't want to read a proposal, an unedited proposal that I write. It'll be like, here are the long tail impacts of this engagement, and here are
Yeah,
all of
but
the.
at least I don't know, at least your content is like, at least um, you're talking about relevant stuff, and you're not giving a sales pitch. I just thought of my university had like, they're like, yeah, vote for the next, the president of the fucking, excuse my language, the president of the, whatever this, they were having elections. They have elections for student body councils and stuff, and I was reading through some of them, and I literally, my vote was based on the, like, the least corny pitch, because everyone, it was the same picture of them smiling and just giving, I'm gonna bring,
I'm going
whatever.
to
It
do
was just,
something that I am not qualified to do, and I'm going to do
yeah,
it better
yeah,
than someone that is qualified
just
to do
the
it.
corniest, yeah. And yeah, that definitely puts me off in terms of university students, and in terms of people who I'm delegating tokens to. If it
Yeah.
sounds like they're being fake, anyways, not super relevant. But yeah, yeah. So let's talk about how Optimism is sort of bringing the social credibility aspect into it, because um, their system is a sort of hybrid system of some plutocratic aspects, and then some of the aspects that we've been talking about with getting people to find value in their social standing rather than just the tokens they hold. So really briefly, I'll just break down what the model is. So you've got two houses. You've got the token house and you have the citizens house. So the tokens house is what we're familiar with. That's the plutocracy. That's the the people who have tokens. They vote, and it the weight is depend on the number of tokens they have. They vote directly. They delegate. They can delegate if they want, but they propose proposals. They submit proposals, and they vote on different governance proposals. The Citizens House is an experiment in non-plutocratic governance, and the Citizens House is what is in charge of retroactive public goods funding. So you have like this two-party system where the Citizens House is directing the funding of the foundation's capital to projects and individuals that they find valuable, and it isn't the token houses, it isn't the token holders' call, right? And the way the citizens get elected, or the way you become a citizen, and the way that they keep track of citizens' social standing is through attestations. So attestations are proof of something. You're attesting to the validity or the weight of something. And they have this thing called the attestation station. And it's a smart contract on Optimism, and then anyone can make arbitrary attestations about any other address based on that address's actions. So then you build this social credibility based on your actions in the collective, and it's a reputation system built through these attestations. And so you have those people who have built their credibility through their actions and not through how many tokens they hold, and they are in charge of the funding of the collective. And so it's a really cool, so you still have this like plutocratic aspect of it, but it's just like it's a really cool implementation of what we've been talking about. Do you have any thoughts on that, like, reputation system?
I mean, I think that's super smart. I think like is this like can someone game this? I don't know. I'll have to read the GitHub repository.
Yeah. It's
it's a good idea.
It is Sybil resistant, the attestation station. Yeah, and that's kind of like it's kind of the whole point of it. I mean, it's not the point of it, but that's a huge part of it, is that it's Sybil resistant. And look, I really wish I was an engineer so I could dive into the details more, but it's based on addresses. And I mean, I guess like if you're creating a bunch of addresses and you're doing, it wouldn't really matter, because like you could have, oh god, I'm worried about sounding stupid.
That's okay.
But like, you're gonna have having more identities as a citizen doesn't really do you any good. It's like your reputation and like how you grows is what matters. It's not the number of citizens. Yeah, so here we go.
Yeah. So I guess like we can start out. What are attestations? Attestations are statements by a creator about a subject. Okay. They could present any qualitative or quantitative statement. Okay. Great. How can you go from attestations to Sybil-resistant identity? And I'll zoom in.
Nice. Here we go.
So attestations in the attestation station are on-chain and can be used by other smart contracts in a variety of applications. Instead of having a single entity owning user data and identity, the attestation station is a graph of peer-to-peer attestation. So it's a social graph, which is kind of like what Lens is, for example. It's essentially tracking relationships and building weight inside of each node. And each node could be an address. It could be a smart contract. So trusted attestations are made by organizations. Interesting. And social attestations are made from one person to another. Okay, and anyone can take this graph and run computations. Okay, so you can check the weight of trusted attestations and of social attestations. And I imagine social attestations, like, you can use it for security, because you look at social attestations, if there are like a million and there are 0 trusted attestations, then you're like, okay, that's
It's still
obviously,
not, yeah.
So yeah, awesome. So they're doing like a relatively straightforward social network, which makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah,
having
so
it be on chain is cool as well.
yeah. So I guess that's where the civil resistance comes from, is the distinction between trusted and social attestations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I would say, like, that's a really great start. I think, to me, I would say the ultimate thing you can do is um, build up trusted attesters, which I don't know how someone goes about that, to be honest. But having more and more trusted attestation people, I feel, would be really valuable, because to me, the social attestations are not that valuable. Um, you know, Maybe what you can do is, like, you can make people verify their Twitter account, and you can run like some kind of algorithm on their Twitter account that determines whether or not it's BS or not, and give social weight that way. But yeah, I mean, I imagine, like, the way you'd use this is taking the balance between trusted and untrusted. And this is actually really cool. I would be interested in, like, asking all of our partners to help us
yeah,
out with attestations, so that I
yeah,
can get free money. Just kidding.
yeah. Salvor just said Benji has a nice thread on attestations. I think I saw that a while ago. I regret not bringing that up, but yeah, we could do like um, a mini episode, or like a little 10-minute, 15-minute thing with Benji, possibly, um,
Yeah.
solely about attestations. Okay, I just thought about, I guess, like, yeah, the crux of the problem is some sort of proof without KYC. And I just started thinking about ZK proofs, you know? And is
Yeah.
there a way to use ZK proofs to um, be able to build social credibility by trusting, um, or using ZK proofs to prove the person in question, or the entity in question?
Yeah,
I don't know how much you
it's
know about ZK proofs.
definitely possible. It's like, basically, with a ZK proof, all you're going to know is whether something executed successfully or not. So you're essentially creating hardware circuits using this, like, SIRCOM programming language to design a means of executing something without anybody knowing it. It's like a big black box, Schrodinger's box of execution, or whatever. Um, so I would say it's definitely possible. I know, like, zero knowledge KYC, a lot of people are researching that. I think it's one of the better applications for ZK technology, is, noodling into a database, someone requesting something, and then, running a function. But the thing is, like, ZK circuits, like, it's pure math. So without having state, I suppose, how can you figure out whether or not someone is who you say, uh, or someone is doing the type of thing that you want? I guess, like, what you can do, and now I don't know with ZK EVM implementations whether state is visible or not off chain. Um, that would be, like, I think the execution happens in, like, a zero knowledge state, but you still need state. It's like, ZK exists as kind of a mathematical abstraction to whatever, computation you're doing. So yeah, I would need to maybe get a little smarter and maybe let
Dude,
some of
you're
the
telling
teams
me.
working on it
Yeah.
get a little further along before I know what's possible exactly. It's definitely like theoretically, like you can, submit a ZK proof saying, oh, okay, this person passed our check, and that check can be something like a KYC check. But yeah, exactly how you're giving the execution environment access to state and how you can ensure that state is properly encrypted or invisible, I think is the big one. So maybe if your private key is also what unlocks state or similar. Who knows? I mean, I'm sure some people know.
Yeah.
Definitely not me.
Yeah. I watched those videos that it's like a theoretical physicist explains physics to 5 levels of people, and they start with like a kindergartner, and then there's like a high schooler, and then like an undergrad, and then they go up, and then eventually it's like 2 experts. Anyways, I watched one of those on ZK proofs and realized that I'm like a 10-year-old. As soon as they get to like the high schooler, I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah,
Trying to
yeah. It's like
crazy.
creating like hardware. Essentially, you're essentially programming like a new type of transistor. It's almost
Yeah.
like it's. I mean, I don't want to say it's like quantum computing level because that really is like using weird ass hardware. Maybe it isn't. Honestly, like, dude, this stuff. It's like to become interested, I would need to read more documentation than I'm willing to read. I guess I could
Yeah.
become a YouTube video guy, but the only YouTube videos I watch are about
RuneScape?
backyard design. No, not even RuneScape.
Backyard design. Oh,
Um,
that's cool.
backyard
Yeah.
design. No, that's just lately. Sometimes I watch reality TV too. But
Oh, dude.
yeah, I'm like a pleb. I am, but yeah, and that's right, Fallout Zone. We do all start somewhere. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
I really dig like Optimism is making really like it looks like simple undirected social graph,
Yeah.
and you can figure out how many people are like, you know what, this guy's good in my book. I think what would be really interesting is, I mean, data solves a lot of problems. Like you can figure out whether someone's real or not by analyzing their behavior to a certain extent. And the tough part is once people realize what you're measuring to determine whether or not someone is legitimate, they're just going to start mimicking those. And that's kind of a testament to the power of blockchain and its programmability. Is things that might take like a bunch of different entities interacting, like trying to frickin' buy a house, for example, dealing with escrow, dealing with lenders, dealing with your counterparty, dealing with realtors. It's like all these people like banging their heads together trying to figure things out, when with the blockchain, with a little bit of machine learning, you can accomplish that probably in like 10 minutes. And there, like, the tough thing is it makes the other side also much easier. Like if your goal is to pretend to be fake by creating a bunch of transactions that would make someone think you're real, then it's like as easy as writing 20 to 50 lines of JavaScript.
Yeah.
And
Which
that's
I
the
guess.
tough part.
Yeah. Yeah. Um,
You could learn
yeah.
JavaScript. I promise
You
you,
don't
if
even have to
you
anymore now. You can
felt
just use
like it.
ChatGPT 4 or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could just be
GPT-4,
like,
dude.
"Hey,
Yeah.
ChatGPT." Well, you
Yeah.
would need to learn how to run JavaScript and build an environment, which
Yeah. Yeah.
is like that's what kills a lot of newbies, is building their first development environment. But now, yeah, I use GitHub Copilot now. Um, it doesn't quite get the code right, but for writing documentation and implementing algorithms, it like is super duper easy.
Yeah.
Um, but like we're getting to a point where how do you tell the difference between someone who's real and someone who's not without KYC? And even
Yeah.
KYC, like there are ways to game it. Technology is just too crazy, I would say.
Yeah.
We need to
Yeah.
tone it down.
Yeah, it is kind of a paradox because like the further you get along the technological improvement timeline, it's like both parties are having an easier time, you know, the ones who are trying to game and then the ones who are trying to protect against it. But
It's a constant
um
battle.
it's a constant game of cat and mouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn SQL right now for Dune. And I will say uh I'm very grateful for ChatGPT just to
Nice.
like get the basics.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, okay, I have a question for you. So
Sure.
I wanted to ask when you think this governance system should be put in place given the lifetime of a project or a business or a protocol, because the goal for, you know, pretty much everyone in DeFi and crypto is to get to some sort of fully decentralized state. But if you do that right off the bat, I mean, that's, in my opinion, pretty unwise, because like those first business decisions for a project that's just starting out, it's like those initial
Yeah.
decisions made in the first year are so critical that you can't just leave it up to the community and expect things to work out. So what,
Yeah.
like how important do you think it is, sort of at what point do you want to sort of start surrendering decisions to a community, and what kind of decisions should be first for them to decide on?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say like the second you are ready to aggressively penetrate the market and make noise, is when you need to be like really decentralized, or soon after. Um, I would say like, at Bytebases, we've been working on getting governance set up for the Oath Foundation and for the Grain Foundation, and trying to figure out what makes sense, what will be most compliant, what will be most sensible and usable, what is the right balance between, executive decision making and community decision making. Um, it's all like a really big challenge, and what a lot of users don't understand is it's a legal challenge more than anything. Like, we've got our general counsel, we have a lawyer who advises us on governance, we have a team member almost totally dedicated to governance, and we've been working on it, and it's hard. It's hard to protect the community. It's hard to ensure that the system can't be exploited. It's hard to ensure that proper decisions are being made and they're being accounted for properly. And so, yeah, I would say like the reason you want governance is so that if you get big, you're already decentralized. Before like you start bringing on a lot of attention, you're already decentralized. And I would say like, our whole strategy at Bytemasons is to kind of lay low. Like, okay, we're not going to try to penetrate the market until it's feasible to do so. We're not going to start emitting tokens or hemorrhaging capital just for attention when DeFi isn't profitable yet. And so now that it's like, all right, Ethos Reserve is coming out soon. We just released Digit. On Optimism, we're going to align our entire stack and let it rip, and we can conceivably generate enough revenue to offset token incentives. At that point, it's like, all right, it's time to spend, and it's time to focus on penetrating the market. It's time to focus on building a lot of weight, and you don't want there to be a single point of failure when that's the mission and when that's the goal. So really, it's like governance should always be a focus, like figuring out how to make decisions, whether it be corporate governance. So, how can you ensure decisions aren't made unilaterally? How can you make sure there are checks and balances in place to ensure, without getting too bureaucratic. And then you should take that and you should figure out, how can we wrap the community into this? And how can we even eventually give communities sole control? And how can we, I don't want to say groom because it has so many weird implications nowadays, but how can we build up community members to take leadership roles when it's time to kind of hang up the mantle and fall back as an organization to a delegate or on equal terms with the community. And I know Optimism has a lot of trouble with that. We have a lot of trouble. Everybody has a lot of trouble because nobody wants to be an Ave or a compound where nobody cares about governance and it's all the same 5 or 6 VCs just voting everything through, which is cringe. Frankly.
And that's the other upside to not having a completely grassroots starting or raising the funding that you need at the beginning from a community rather than a VC, is because the funding that you're raising is almost always in the governance token. So it's like, then once you have, it's like, oh, great, we have all this funding and we want to start improving. And it's like, the only improvements we can make have to be basically decided on by the VCs that we gave all of our tokens to. So it's like,
if you look at the regulatory space surrounding DeFi, like VCs plus token companies plus governance, like it doesn't, like it throws an error, it's really nonsensical. And like, I just look at VC backed companies with tokens and I'm like, that's a project that's probably going to get abandoned because like you can't really comply. It's like your VCs are just going to be served subpoenas or whatever. So, I mean, I guess like when you're talking about like a SAFT or a SAFE or some fundraising mechanism, and I guess now we're getting into the weeds, but you need to kind of neuter your seed investors and your big capital backers at the governance level. Otherwise, it invalidates everything. And either that or they need to be like totally get it and need to like step back and let the community govern. But I digress. I mean, we've probably talked about governance enough. Is there anything else you wanted to cover?
No, we've covered quite a bit. I actually have to go in like 15 minutes, which I completely forgot about. But yeah, it's probably a good place to wrap it up. I'm sure that we're going to talk about governance a lot more. And I would be very excited to get some people from OP Labs or the foundation to talk about it also, because it's a huge topic. And I mean, it's an even bigger topic when it comes to optimism, or, compared to other networks, other protocols. It's like optimism is kind of leading the charge in this sense. So does anybody in the community have any quick questions that we could address before? Or Zengel said, when will we get a co-determination opportunity? I don't know what that is. What is it?
I think that means when can community members make decisions along with the team? Very soon. It's probably one of our highest priorities after Ethos is shipped. So
let's go.
Yeah, very soon. I'm so freaking excited for that. You have no idea.
Dude, same. Let's go. Nice. Well, I really enjoyed the convo. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everybody. I don't know how many viewers we're up to now, but
we're down to 5 again.
Maybe double digits. Oh, okay.
We have 10, 8. I think we're doing pretty good.
Nice.
This is
honestly, the recordings have been getting quite a few views, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when we have guests. Or diverse subject matter.
On that note, everyone watching, thank you, Kickflip. Love you. Everyone watching and everybody watching in the future. Next week, we will have hopefully some really cool guests on. and we'll probably be doing a Twitter space, but the topic is going to be something in the under the derivatives umbrella. So we're going to have some guests, some panelists on from the Optimism community that are very involved in derivatives. And I don't want to say who they are just in case they cancel or can't.
Yeah.
So not to throw them under the bus. But yeah, it's going to be an awesome. We're going to have quite a few panelists, and we'll probably do a Twitter space. So look out for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, derivatives. It's going to be really, really fun. I'm really excited. So that's next week, same time, same day.
Thank
all right,
you, everybody.
awesome.
Like, comment,
Thanks,
subscribe.
Beavis. Thanks, community. See y'all.
Sayonara.